Welcome to this edition of Platform. I am Muhammad Kudu Abubakar. The United Nations estimates that more than 750 million adults across the world are illiterate. This represents 20% of the world's adult population. These illiteracy levels are, however, not evenly distributed. Two-thirds of the more than 750 million adults are women, and regions where poverty and discrimination is more prevalent have lowest national literacy rates. The United Nations also declared 8 September as the International Literacy Day in 1965. Since then, the day is celebrated annually as a time for showing concern for improving world literacy, a time for literacy fundraising campaigns, and special media awareness campaigns are organized on the subject of literacy. The issue of literacy is a key component of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. One of the targets of Sustainable Development Goal 4 is ensuring all young people achieve literacy and numeracy, and that adults who lack these skills are given opportunity to acquire them. Due to the prevailing coronavirus pandemic, the 2020 International Literacy Day, which was observed on the 8th of September, focused on literacy teaching and learning in the COVID-19 crisis and beyond. The campaign devoted special attention to the role of educators and changing pedagogies, especially on youths and adults, to whom literacy learning is a lifelong learning perspective. This edition of Platform examines how the International Literacy Day 2020 was celebrated in Nigeria with a focus on educators and literacy learning. Our guest is Professor Abba Abubakar Haladu, the Executive Secretary, National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education. The Commission had in October 2016 outlined how it planned to produce 30 million literate Nigerians in 3 years. Now in 2020, what is the total population of illiterate persons in Nigeria? With the prevailing COVID-19, how has the Commission targeted Nigerian youths and adults to reduce the level of illiteracy? All these questions and more for Professor Abba Abubakar Haladu. He was appointed Executive Secretary, National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education in 2016. Professor Haladu is an educationist whose area of specialization is literacy studies and community education. Until his appointment in 2016, Professor Abba Abubakar Haladu was a professor at the Department of Adult Education and Community Services, Bayero University, Kano. In 2020, he was Pioneer Dean, Faculty of Education, Jigawa State University. Professor Abba Abubakar Haladu, Executive Secretary, National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education, welcome to Platform.
Thank you for having me.
As usual, on the panelist corner, we have Rashida Olagunju, head of NTA's Education Desk.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Abba Abubakar Haladu, welcome once again. Let's begin from the beginning.
Right.
Who is an illiterate? And how do you calculate illiteracy? And how does literacy improve life?
Well, your first question, who is an illiterate, is a person who is unable to read and write in any language, simply.
Read and write in any language?
Yeah, unable. The person who is unable to read and write in any language is considered an illiterate person.
But that appears a little bit controversial to me, and because there are people who don't understand English, and the fact that they don't understand English, people think they're illiterate.
No, it's not about a particular language. Any language that a person can read and write, that person is considered a literate person. And whereas a person cannot read and write in any language, is then considered an illiterate person. It doesn't matter the language. It could be English, Arabic, French, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba, any language.
So which means we need to change the narrative about this, because most people believe that once you can't read or write English, in English, you are not illiterate.
No, absolutely not. It's not about English. For instance, You get quite a number of people, even in Europe, who cannot speak, write English because they have a different language and they have advanced in even areas of science and technology. So it's not about English, it's not about French, it's not about German. Any language that somebody can read and write is considered a literate person. And whereas somebody cannot read and write in any language, then is considered an illiterate person.
So which means by the time you can calculate illiteracy, in Nigeria particularly, it means the level of those considered illiterate will reduce drastically.
Well, we follow certain ways to arrive at the figures, sometimes from surveys, from population census, etc., to arrive at the number of people who are illiterate or who are illiterate in a country, for instance. So, well, of course, if you consider a number of people, for instance, either from the northern part of the country or from the southwestern part of the country, who could read and write, say, in Arabic, or could read and write in Ajami form of writing, then they are considered literate.
Ajami is a form of Arabic writing?
It's Arabic characters that are used in local languages to write. So we have that in the Hausa language, and probably you could also get that in other languages, using the Arabic characters to write in local languages is what is called Ajami. So whoever can be able to read and write in using such characters is considered literate. So probably the fact that people think it is only when you can read and write in English that you are called a literate person, no, I think is not correct. So it can be any language, like we said. Whether that could reduce the number of the illiterate or the non-literate, I think is another thing to look at.
Well, as a commission and as a professional, how do you begin to calculate illiteracy?
Well, like I said, surveys are used, census are used where people are asked, for instance, can you be able to read or write your name or simple sentences, for instance? And the response of the respondents do give a clue as to whether such people could read and write or not. So the 2006 census figures, for instance, or the various statistics received from the United UIS, you find that they give a clue as to the number of non-literate people in Nigeria in particular.
Yeah, the 2006 you just mentioned gave the percentage of non-literate persons as at 46%.
Yeah.
At that time, Nigeria's population was 140 million.
Yeah.
That's a huge
yeah, absolutely.
number.
It is quite a big number.
What can we extrapolate now? We're in 2020.
Well, the estimate is that there are over 60 million youth and adults in Nigeria who cannot read and write. And of course, in addition to the over 10 million out-of-school children. So it is quite a big number and quite a source of worry.
There's a large gap between the state in Nigeria considered to have the highest literacy and that of the lowest. What do you think is responsible for this?
Well, quite a number of factors are responsible for the varying literacy levels across the regions of the country. For instance, the early introduction of Western education in the western and southern part of the country is quite a factor in that respect. Or because of certain cultural reasons for people not to initially accept Western education in the northern part of the country, for instance, might have been responsible for the low literacy level, among other factors, of course, like poverty, which are also linked to the inadequate education in the northern part of the country, for instance, in comparison to the southern part of the country.
Then why celebrate the International Literacy Day? Because we mentioned in the introduction the United Nations came up with the idea and declared 8th of September annually as the International Literacy Day, and this started in 1965. So far, why do you think that day was set aside, and what has been the benefits?
Well, the day was set aside in order to inform the public on the importance of literacy as a matter of dignity and human right. And of course, to also advance the cause of literacy agenda generally, so that both governments and people could be aware of the importance of literacy on the one hand, and on the other, the challenges that abound in terms of the large number of people that are unable to access this fundamental skill in life. So, over the years, the Literacy Day has been celebrated, of course, since 1967. And annually, you find that a lot of advocacy is being made. People are being informed, both policymakers, that look, there are certain things you haven't done, and that is why the illiteracy level is high. And to the clients or the beneficiaries, to also be reminded that, look, it is important for you to access and acquire the literacy skill, because it is fundamental, it's foundational for success in life, for attaining growth, development, and sustainability. So we believe that the celebration adds up to the information level, to the sensitization and mobilization of both policymakers and the general public to support the literacy agenda.
Okay, yes, it is a good one. But would you say it has impacted on Nigeria literacy level positively?
Well, it is not only a celebration that will impact on a literacy level. Yes, to some extent. If, for instance, as a result of the Literacy Day celebration, for instance, pockets of policymakers were able to be informed, and they take the necessary positive steps to provide the necessary resources, for instance, or political will to improve literacy skills of their people, then it has added value. And likewise, if the general public are mobilized, are sensitized, are informed, and they're able to also join a literacy class where they are, then we can say it has impacted positively.
Was that what happened?
Because that was why I asked this question.
Was that what happened?
Because like many other days that we celebrate in Nigeria, annually we roll out drums, we have seminars and conferences, all sorts of things. We gather policymakers, as you rightly said, and we come out with lofty ideas on how to move a certain day forward. And apart from, aside that, you won't hear much about the implementation of those policies until the next year again.
Well, that is, I want to believe, a different issue, which I believe that you are going to ask us, or to ask me about. But irrespective of the celebrations, well, we can be able to say that, yes, we are recording some little successes in that respect. But where a nation, for instance, face squarely the issue of fighting illiteracy, is far beyond the issue of a particular day that is being celebrated. There are a lot of issues that needs to be looked into.
I appreciate your response, but let's now zero it to the 2020 celebrations, which was dedicated to literacy teaching and learning in COVID-19 crisis and beyond. How did it go in Nigeria?
Well, the theme, of course, is a reflection of the current situation we are in, the coronavirus crisis or pandemic, which led to the closure of schools and learning centers in both formal and the non-formal education sector. So what the theme is saying is that we need to look at the situation, see how teaching and learning could happen within the pandemic, and also what happens after the pandemic because of certain changes which needs to be made in the way teaching and learning takes place, either for literacy learners or for other adult and non-formal education programs. For instance, there is a growing emphasis on the use of the information technology,
ICT.
technology, ICT, to improve access to education and learning. And of course, how teachers themselves can be able to actually know and get skilled about using the modern technology in teaching, as well as how governments can provide the necessary facilities and equipment that will improve access to knowledge by the clients. So it is talking about what do we do, what are we doing, or what do we do during the pandemic, and what do we do after the pandemic in order to ensure that teaching and learning, meaningful teaching and learning continue.
So what did you find out, and what are your resolutions?
Well, like you all know, it is quite difficult for face-to-face meeting during this time. So the available options left to us, of course, had to do with essentially the traditional information technology that we have been using, particularly radio and television. And we have rolled out pockets of literacy by radio programs, particularly in English, for new literates, because there is a little difficulty in teaching the stuck illiterates the skills only using the radio or the television. But for new literates, they can be able to learn using these information outlets. But there is a fundamental challenge in using the other ICT media in terms of accelerating teaching and learning because of a number of factors, particularly in developing countries like ours. So we are using the traditional information and communication technology available to us to improve access to learning, and then we are planning to see what happens after the COVID so that traditional teaching and learning can actually continue, because it will be difficult to replace the teacher. It will be difficult to replace also the traditional way of doing things in our own context. But of course, we have to keep on improving what we have so that we can also go along with the current trend in the world using the ICT to ensure that teaching and learning takes
Yeah, I was going to ask that. You don't want to attempt the virtual classrooms at all?
Well, you know, it depends, particularly at the basic level, which we give more emphasis on. It's a little bit difficult. You can just imagine non-literate people in a village, right, who are being constrained by a number of issues, be it poverty, be it lack of electricity, be it lack of even the modern cell phones and Android phones and what have you. How do you do that? I think one will only be eluding himself to think that that can happen. But probably at higher levels of education, where you are talking about distance learning, you find that that can happen. And to some extent, it is happening, particularly at the higher levels of the private universities. The public universities, of course, are closed because of the strike action. But you find that pockets of these are happening. But if I tell you that virtual learning can take place at the basic literacy level, I'm not telling you the truth.
Definitely. Definitely.
Now, let's zero to the theme of the 2020 celebration. Who are the educators in a mass literacy learning process, and what will you say are the pedagogical changes needed?
Well, it depends on the level that we are talking about. We need to appreciate the fact that we have the basic level, the basic literacy level, which is equivalent to primary 3. We have the post-literacy level, which is equivalent to primary 6. Then we have the continuing education levels, the equivalent of the junior secondary school and the equivalent of the senior secondary school, and then you now go on to open learning, open distance learning, right? Where the clients can acquire whatever level of education or degrees. Now, if you're talking at the basic level, these are we call them facilitators. And these are volunteers, mostly volunteers. They can be teachers from the formal education sector. They can be my humble self or yourself. So, volunteering.
So they don't get paid.
No, they get allowances.
Okay.
They get allowances for like monthly allowances, just to support their transportation to the literacy centers where they are providing services. So the non-formal education sector relies more on volunteers, not salaried staff, because it's not going to be possible. So these are facilitators, and they require training in the methods of teaching adults, because they need to understand the characteristics of youth and adults that they are teaching. They need to understand classroom management, and then they need to understand probably then a little bit of what they can be able to use in terms of modern technology to teach. So they require all this kind of training, right, to enable them carry out their duties. Then if you move to the higher level of, let's say, post-literacy or continuing education, you also rely on services from existing teachers, for instance, who, however, needs to be trained to provide those services, because you are dealing with a subset that they are not children, and therefore they need to be treated with decorum, with respect, to understand their characteristics, their challenges, so that the teacher can be able to carry them along. These are people who probably missed opportunity, and therefore you have to treat them, it's a second chance to treat them with kids' gloves. So the facilitators, or if you like, call them teachers, they need special training in this. That is the pedagogy, how they can be able to handle the adult learners, how they can be able to manage the classes, how they can be able to mobilize, how they can be able to assess the learning of the clients, and how they can be able to even relate with the community. Because these are people who probably think that they don't take the issue of the literacy or education essential. So you need to do a lot to sensitize them, to mobilize them. It's a community endeavor, and therefore the facilitators, all the teachers, or whatever you may call them, need special training in this.
So how many of them do you have now, and then how many learning centers do you have across the country?
Well, it is very difficult to say how many learning centers you have. Why? Because the services are provided by different actors. For instance, you can have the state agencies for mass education mounting programs. You can have, in some respects, some local government councils doing so. You have non-governmental organizations in the sphere, in the field. You also have some international development partners intervening to provide such services. And sometimes the National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education do provide some interventions in terms of rural facilitator scheme. So it is very difficult to say precisely these are the number of classes that you have, unlike what you have in the formal education setting, right? It's a little bit difficult. But what we do annually is to carry out monitoring and evaluation of the programs that go on across the states. And from 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019, you find that averagely there are, like, say, the number of people that are turned out to be literate, 700, 800, 900, right? It's less than 1 million.
Person that you graduate to become
to become literate. Yes,
okay.
It's less than a year. I mean, it's less than a million in each of the years that I actually mentioned.
That is across the nation.
Yeah, across the nation. Yeah, across the nation. Both the classes offered by either government agencies or non-governmental organizations.
Okay, now, you didn't say anything about the educators. Do we have them? Are they sufficient for this?
Yeah, we have sufficient educators. Like I said, the sector rely more on volunteers, and they are available. They are quite well-educated Nigerians that are willing to always volunteer to provide such services. Where the problem lies is, how do you remunerate them? How do you provide the requisite learning materials that they are going to use? How do you ensure that the centers are open, they are there, and therefore they can actually be able to provide such services? So that's where the problem lies. The sector is never lacking in terms of those who are going to teach or who are willing to provide services in non-formal education centers.
Okay, in that case, are there in any way, is there any partnership between you and UBEC? Because I know UBEC has this a project for training teachers, especially those with special needs. Is there any collaboration between you and UBEC in this?
Well, there is area of collaborations between the National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education and the Universal Basic Education Commission. But the emphasis of training teachers being anchored by UBEC or by NTA or by TRCN has to do more with the formal education sector. Primary school teachers, junior secondary school teachers, right? But we do collaborate, we exchange ideas, and we receive also some support from the Universal Basic Education Commission, which enables us to develop some training materials or provide some training for the facilitators in the non-formal education sector.
Let's dwell a little bit on the educators. I understand there are two distinct groupings within the educators. The non-governmental organizations, I understand, have grouped themselves into an association of literacy support services, and then you have the NYSC Literacy Volunteer Corps. What is the extent of support and that you get from these two distinct groupings?
Well, the one single umbrella, for instance, which of course even the NYSC Volunteer Corps should be part of, is the NOGALS, that is Non-Governmental Association for Literacy Support Services. It's an umbrella of all NGOs that are active in the non-formal education sector. And they have offices in most of the states of the Federation, if not all. And they try to ensure that the classes being operated by non-governmental organizations and volunteers are operating within the confines of the rules and regulations either provided by the National Commission or by the NOGAS itself, and that wherever some support is provided, they link these their state chapters to ensure that they receive such kind of support, and to ensure that there is also synergy between the non-governmental organizations and the state agencies for mass education working together to promote the adult and non-formal education subsector. So they are key, because like I said earlier on, most of the services are provided also by the non-governmental organizations, and therefore they are providing quite substantial services in making people literate in Nigeria.
So on the whole, you don't have an idea as to the percentage of support that these key NGOs give your commission?
Well, you know, it's not something you can quantify. Providing services is not like providing naira and kobo or dollar. It's not something you can quantify. But like I said earlier on, the classes they operate, we monitor them and we collect data on them. So they are providing quite significant services in those areas that I mentioned earlier on. in all the levels of the adult and non-formal education.
Now, you assumed duty in 2016 as the executive secretary. Now, let's go to, because I'm aware in the media, I read in the media, before you came in, your predecessor had a lot of challenges. The commission itself went down and all that. Since you came in, what strategies have you developed to first and foremost functionally make the commission effective, and at the same time develop to eradicate illiteracy across the country?
Yeah, well, it has not been easy, but we have made what I can call substantial progress. I focused attention on four main areas. One, and that is the most fundamental, is developing the requisite learning materials in the sector. We have been able to develop exactly 51 pieces of materials, teaching and learning materials, ranging from policy guideline document, operational plan for a national mass literacy program, communication policy guideline, primers in English and the three major Nigerian languages, curriculum in English and the three major Nigerian languages, code of conduct for non-formal education centers in English and the three major Nigerian languages, and further reading materials, 6 each, in 6 thematic areas in English and the three major Nigerian languages. Some of them have already been developed and produced. Some we are about finalizing their development, and it is my hope that before the year runs out, the Honorable Minister for Education will launch these materials, because they are fundamental in the task of eradicating illiteracy in the country. That is number one. Number two is to ensure that facilities, especially physical facilities that belongs to the non-formal education sector, are not only safeguarded but rehabilitated and improved upon, so that they can serve the very purpose they were established for in the first place. And in this respect too, we have made significant progress. For instance, the National Center for Adult Education in Kano, which even predates the commission, yes. Have been quite in a bad shape. But we have tried in the last 4 years to improve the physical facilities there, and I hope one day you will go and see it. And we have already developed a curriculum that will enable the commission to provide short and medium short courses and medium courses also for facilitators and other practitioners in adult and non-formal education sector, and hoping that the impact will even go beyond Nigeria. And I'm pretty sure in a year to come, all these courses will actually come up, and then we can be able to adequately train lower and mid-level personnel for eradicating illiteracy in Nigeria and the development of the non-formal education sector. We have other facilities like the MENA Vocational Resource Center, which we are currently also renovating. And there are 13 community learning centers that are established in 2 each in the geopolitical zones and the Federal Capital Territory, and plans are underway to ensure that they are fully functional so that they can serve the purpose they were established for. And there are other facilities also which we are also trying to actually upgrade and ensure that they are working. Thirdly, we met a situation whereby we have a relatively large number of staff employed those days, and which we need to put them to work. And this requires us to open state offices, which hitherto are non-existent. We only have zonal offices, one in each of the geopolitical zones. It has not been easy, but we are on it. So far we have set up state offices in about 10 states, including Kano, Jigawa, Yobe, FCT, Niger, Kogi, Akwa Ibom, and we have a regional center also in Owerri that we are trying to ensure that it is also fully functional. So we are hoping that probably in some months to come, we will have state offices in all the states of the Federation, and therefore the staff of the Commission can now spearhead whatever effort that is being put in place for the eradication of illiteracy and the development of the non-formal education sector in the country. Fourthly, we try to bring together the various stakeholders in the non-formal education sector, which is very important. And over the years, we have been having meetings, some training programs, and carried out some advocacy visits to some state governors, for instance, to ensure that they buy into the agenda of ensuring that they support the mass literacy adult and non-formal education sector in their respective states. So the coming together, the rejuvenation of the relationship between the Commission and other stakeholders, just like the NOGAs we mentioned, like the Nigerian National Council for Adult Education, NNCAE, the veterans in the non-formal education sector, we have all been working together. And I'm optimistic that what we have done over the years will galvanize into something coming from the government in that respect.
What of support from international bodies like UNESCO, UNICEF?
Well, we have also been working with international development partners who have come to be intervening also in the sphere of non-formal education in consideration of the large number of out-of-school children and the youth who are unable to read and write. So USAID, DFID, UNICEF, UNESCO, we have all been working together. However, and of course the World Bank too, although we don't have a direct support from the World Bank, but they are also assisting with the BESDA program, which also relates to us in terms of bringing out-of-school children into learning centers. The only challenge we have with the various development partners is the fact that the arrangement that they have made, the MOU that they have signed with the federal government, which was in 2015 before we came in, allow them to go to states directly and intervene. And they therefore sometimes
consultation with you.
Yes, skip the responsible federal agencies. And at the end of it all, you find that sustainability is actually lacking in the projects and programs that they execute. So of course, we have been calling on them to do the right thing. Come through the relevant federal agencies, let us synergize our activities so that there can be more progress.
So that as they are pulling out, we can take ownership.
We can take over. For instance, you find a development partner intervening in the non-formal education sector, developing a learning material on its own. And you find another one also developing a learning material on its own. And I say, why don't all of us come together and develop a single learning material that will serve the whole purpose? Because we are all targeting the same client. But so you find that there is duplication and there is wastages. And therefore, this is something that, of course, we have to continue to
talk about.
To exchange, to exchange
but if I may say
words
so,
and opinions so that we can
you
all
could
go on the
review
same
the
page.
MOU with these international bodies through the Federal Ministry of Education that you are responsible to.
Well, like I said, this was done before we came in. So probably in the next pace of signing such MOUs, I'm pretty sure the development partners will do the right.
Because usually they have their lifespan.
Yeah, they have their lifespan.
And we have to.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Professor, let me bring you back to this issue. The presenter read out in his opening that women somehow are leading the table when it comes to illiteracy. So what are we doing to change this narrative, given the fact that most often...
In fact, two-thirds,
yes,
according to statistics.
most often it is mothers that are usually at home when the children come back to school. So how will she put them through their school assignment and stuff like that?
Yeah, in most development indices in Nigeria, and of course in most of the third world, developing countries, you find that women are at the receiving end, either in terms of illiteracy, either in terms of poverty, either in terms of other aspects that relate to maternal mortality, etc., etc. So it is quite a big challenge. And we all see literacy as a panacea to some of the challenges that women are actually facing. The issue is, how do we extend the literacy education to the women who are who are majority in the illiteracy ladder, and this gets back to the access, the availability of the interventions, which rests majorly with the state governments and the local governments, because it's basic education. Ideally, the federal government should only be concerned with providing some policy guidelines, curriculum, learning materials, but not and coordination, but not directly going to open classes and what have you. But you find that most of the states and the local governments have actually fallen short in terms of providing literacy education to the people, partly because they are overwhelmed by the challenges in the formal education sector itself, and partly because they are yet to appreciate the importance and the potency of literacy education in changing the narratives in terms of the multifarious development challenges that we have. I think that's part of it majorly. They are yet to appreciate. They do not probably know. Of course, you often hear a number of state governors linking the issue of insecurity and poverty to illiteracy. But the question is, what have they done in order to change the situation? So the issue of providing access to literacy education is one of the biggest challenges of Nigeria as a nation, because it is only when people are literate, then they can be knowledgeable, then they can be skilled, then they can be productive, then they can ensure growth and development. Whatever programs that are being put in place by governments, either at the level of states or the federal government, insofar as significant proportion of the Nigerian population remain illiterate and unskilled, these programs are unlikely to succeed. And more fundamentally is the fact that we are assuming an enviable position of becoming the third most populous country in the world in the next 3 decades. How do we assume this position and think that we can be able to make a headway when a very significant proportion of our population remain illiterate? So this is a big challenge.
Go ahead.
Now, the question is, if the state governments and the local governments are unable to assume the responsibility that they are vested with, that they should, then it becomes now a burden on the federal government to do the needful, because whatever problems that come up or come out as a result of the illiteracy challenge it is the federal government that bear the brunt of it all.
The large chunk of
The large chunk of it.
Now,
And this is why, in your introduction, you said when we came in, we made a plan of how we can make 10 million people literate in a year in 3 years, so that we can be able to at least somewhat halve the illiteracy challenge. Now, it is a big challenge, and therefore we will continue.
And from the figures you gave, you are making barely 1 million.
Yeah. So we will continue to appeal to the federal government, particularly, Mr. President, that illiteracy is a big challenge in Nigeria, which affects peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. It is illiteracy that gives birth to insecurity, to poverty, and other social vices. And you find that, interestingly, the present administration have rolled out a number of social investment programs. And what is lacking in these social investment programs is the ability of the federal government to head-on attack or fight illiteracy, which will itself go a long way in ensuring that the social investment policies actually work. Because it is about
Because the beneficiaries have to understand.
Pardon?
The program. The beneficiaries need to understand the programs in the
Oh,
first
of
place.
course, to
And how to
understand the
make
programs.
judicious use of what is given to them.
Or whatever is given to them. Because it's not simply a dish out for them to eat and look for more tomorrow. It is about empowering them so that they can stand on their feet. And this requires literacy education.
I appreciate your responses, but let's very quickly look at the methodology that the Commission had used over the years. Each one, teach one. Fund the teaching of one. How far so far?
Well, this came up in the early 2000s, around 1991, 92, where then the campaign was launched, each one teach one or fund the teaching of one. As a result of the fact that governments are not willing to give out the necessary resources to fight illiteracy. And therefore the Commission at that time resorted to the fact that, okay, being our brothers keepers, let us also make a contribution along that line, so that each literate person should be able to teach a non-literate person to become literate. If this can be done, right? If you have 100 million literate Nigerians, then they should be able to teach and make 100 million Nigerians literate, of which case you find that not much resources will be needed from governments to execute probably a campaign against illiteracy. But it's easier said than done. There are a lot of questions or issues that will also have to come up. Who provides the learning materials? Because it's not about you and me. I want to teach you. There must be learning materials. Who provides that?
As we round up the discussion, is that methodology still relevant?
It is relevant at all times. And that we will continue to sensitize and mobilize Nigerians to ensure that they provide such services and they support one another.
And in addition to that, Prof, I don't know, while we were growing up, while I was growing up, there used to be this system then. We have teachers coming into certain area, and women in that area that are literate, they will gather in the evening for teaching. So also in the market places. What actually happened to that?
No, all these are going on in the various programs that have been provided by the actors, state agencies, non-governmental organizations. Some of the programs are taking place in the markets. Some of the programs are taking place in public schools. Some of the programs are taking place in palaces of chiefs.
Why I'm asking this question is because then they even go into the core areas of like the city centers in Kano State then, where women are not allowed to come out to learn. They meet them right in their compound.
Like I said, these programs are still going on. The problem has to do with the...
You know Rashida is now in the urban center, so she doesn't know.
Yeah, the problem has to do
not
with...
the case.
See, the problem has to do with this. There are about 70 million Nigerians that are in need of such services, whereas we are only able to provide, let's say, for 10 million. You find that you may not. The gap is still there.
That brings us back to the issue of the educators.
Yeah, the gap.
So they are not sufficient.
No, it's not about educators. It's not about educators. It's about, for instance, a number of things are needed. You need the educator, what you call the educator or the facilitator, right? He needs to be given some allowances. Who pay for that? Rashidat?
No.
Right.
Certainly, Prof. We may have to leave it there because our time is really
Yeah, but I need to make an appeal.
Go ahead.
Yeah. My appeal is this. Like I said earlier on, illiteracy is a big challenge for Nigeria's development. And of course, aspiration to become one of the 20 sound economies in the world in the next 3 decades. So my appeal is to the highest level. And I'm appealing to Mr. President through the Honorable Minister for Education that the non-formal education sector needs a massive support from Mr. President. It requires his political will so that he can lead the nation for the crusade or fight against illiteracy. And this requires the launching of a campaign against illiteracy, which should target at least 10 million learners each year in the next 3 years, so that by the time this administration comes to an end in 2023, we will have halved the number of non-literate Nigerians. And this will go significantly in ensuring peace, prosperity, and sustainable development. And I am optimistic, and I repeat, I am optimistic once Mr. President is briefed on this or get fully informed about it, he will do the needful. Thank
Professor Abubakar Haladu, I think Mr. President is someone who listens.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for that appeal, and you have made the appeal at the right place in the sense that this is a platform that is viewed and watched all over, and we hope that the necessary and the relevant people will do the needful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the insights,
Thank you
your
very much.
thoughts,
Thank
and
you.
your recommendations.
Thank you very much.
Rashida Olagunju, head of NTA's education desk, thank you for your insights as well.
Thank you for having me.
Platform examined how Nigeria celebrated the 2020 International Literacy Day. It was observed on the 8th of September 2020 with a focus on educators and literacy learning. Our guest, Professor Abubakar Haladu, Executive Secretary, National Commission for Mass Literacy, Adult and Non-Formal Education, spoke extensively on the Commission's strategies to reduce the level of illiterate Nigerians across the board. That's Platform. Thank you for watching. I'm Muhammad Kudu Abubakar. Bye for now.